Hey everyone, this is Chris Miller and you're listening to the EduMind podcast. If you're an architect, project manager, or a nurse, or maybe you're just curious about these career paths, then our podcast is one that you're not going to want to miss. Each week, we'll be talking to subject matter experts, course instructors, and other special guests to bring you the latest and greatest in architecture, project management, and nursing, and a whole lot more. Now, let's dive in. Hello and welcome back. I'm Chris Miller and I have Jeanie Fan back with me again. So let's please welcome her back. Welcome, Jeanie.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Sure, I'm having a lot of fun. We were talking about a lot of exam strategies and some tips and some pathway to licensure. So a lot of fun stuff. So today, well, let's take a step back for a second. So, preparing for an exam is a big commitment, but it's also, it's a challenge for a lot of people. And, not only is it important to, properly strategize and prepare game plans and study plans, but if your heart's not in it, it's very difficult to make it through the whole entire process. So I think that motivation is a key element to preparing for the ARE or actually any exam. So today, we're going to talk about how to stay motivated and, easier said than done, I understand, but you've been through it. So you would be a great person to kind of talk to the audience and share, maybe some motivational, I don't know, not speeches or anything. We're not going to talk about Rocky or something like that, get the Eye of the Tiger song playing, but we'll talk about, how maybe you stay motivated or how, you tell others to kind of stay motivated. Again, it's, a lot easier said than done, but let's try to tackle that together, Jeanie, today and see if we together cannot come up with something.
Yeah.
So I guess, one of the key things to being motivated is to figure out or to understand why you're even starting the journey to begin with. So, like for instance, I used to drive from Ohio to Albuquerque every Christmas, 1,500 miles one way, and it's a long drive, so I was like, what the heck am I even doing this for? Well, to go see some family. So it was easy to stay motivated and get through that drive. So why should someone want to even start the path to the licensure?
Yeah, that's a very good question. After everybody, in the practice, after have gone through the education, why get licensed? Actually, there's a lot of kind of talk and debate about it. Maybe it's not, when we shouldn't have required it, or part of our education should actually give us the licensure already, because we spend all the time and money and effort and all that. But actually, getting licensed, become an architect, it doesn't help going this whole process. It does not make you a better designer, but will make you a better architect. There's like always two part. Everybody, when it's architecture school, the two part to the whole profession: what you learn in school and what you actually in practice. And also, to be an architect, your sole purpose is actually to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. It's actually not about making a statement or actually making yourself, become a household name. It's actually your sole primarily agenda is to protect the health and safety and welfare of the public. So, I can only speak to my own experience why I decided to get licensure, and also it took me a while to get started as well, because for the longest time I also recognized that going to school, learning about design, working, and getting past exam will not make me an architect. I felt like there's more to it. There's life experience, work experience. Also, just as you get older, you become more aware of the social political, just where we are in the world, and that kind of all that actually plays into making you an architect. So Yeah, so the first of all, I think we briefly mentioned the last time that you kind of like being an addict, you haven't decided that you wanted to do this. Um, and it's actually for your own personal good, that you feel like I think in a very spiritual metaphysical way of talking about it, like you find your like you are something, like you have a title, like the society recognize you as a architect or something.
No, it makes sense. Thanks for sharing that. You're right. I mean, motivation can be a very personal thing, right? Everybody is motivated by something else. I mean, whether it's some people are motivated by money, some are motivated by prestige, and I guess the bottom line is, as you were kind of hinting at, is you got to get to the thing that motivates you. Whether or not you want to become a licensed architect because maybe there's a promotion available, or maybe there is more money at the end of the rainbow, or simply you just want to become licensed so that you take that on to where the health and safety of people are on your shoulders, and that's something that motivates you every day to make sure that what's being designed out there meets the standards that'll ensure that. So those are all great things. Sometimes people they want to start the path, they want to start the journey, but they don't really know where to even begin. So what is your advice to maybe finding out what, or to take that first step? Let's say we spoke last time that you got to realize that this is something you want to do, like the addict approach, right? Where, hey, I finally need to get the help. So now you're talking about the ARE. I finally want to take that step. So let's assume that we've already decided, hey, I want to pursue the NCARB certification. So now where would I go from there?
Yeah, that's also the next question that a lot of people ask, because they will go to school across America, and then we all live somewhere else. Like, which state do I start taking my exams in, and where do I start? Actually, I think except Puerto Rico, a few other states, most of the states require the ARE. So you can start from there. Again, go to NCARB's website. Where you currently reside, you want to take the exam in the local test center, or now you can take it remotely. But I think start looking at, maybe you do have a few states in mind, and then look at what the requirements are, what are the crossover, and then maybe start at the where share common jurisdiction requirement. Then that will be the easiest part. And start talking to your friends, definitely, because as we all know, like which test center to take it in, what state, yeah, all that kind of all plays into a little, only the world, a little psyche about like, am I going to pass this or am I going to fail? Yeah.
Right, I agree. And I think we spoke the last couple of times too about networking. It's important to reach out to friends and colleagues that have already been through this journey. Why reinvent the wheel if you don't have to, right? So motivation can kind of go two ways, I guess. There's a double-edged sword, right? So just because you're motivated to do something doesn't mean that you have a positive outlook on it. For instance, let's say you're a kid and you want to go outside and play with your friends, and your parents say, well, you can't go outside until you finish your homework. Well, you might be motivated to get your homework done, but you might not have the positive attitude to be doing the homework. So I think the same thing can apply for preparing for an exam. So let me ask you this, Jeanie. How important is it to have a positive outlook or a positive attitude on your preparation for the ARE?
I think trying to stay neutral instead of like too overly confident or too pessimistic, and it's like, or trying to do your own reverse psychology on yourself. Like, if I think I'm not gonna pass, and if I pass, and you go in there or go in there, I'm gonna do the best I can. This is all going within that mindset, and not trying to use the result to judge yourself one way or the other. And if it's your first exam or even second exam, you don't know about that section. This is the first time you take it, you just like, I'm just getting to know it. And then maybe the next time when you study for it, you're like, oh, last time I see a lot of those questions on HVAC. Let me go brush up on all my mechanical studies. It's like, I didn't know how to calculate, unit tons, or how do you size a ductwork. Let me review that. So it, never kind of trying to be like, oh my God, I failed it. I must be not, set up to do this. No, we all went through that process. we all have our own doubts, and just kind of like going in is gaining that experience. You are gaining experience on taking the exam. Yeah, that's a very, take it in that mindset.
That makes sense. So I agree with you. Sometimes having a too positive attitude or a too negative attitude can affect your performance. So, when I was in college, every class should have exams. And I would always tell the professors, don't give me my exam back. Once you grade it, I don't want to know what it is. That way, I don't know if I'm sitting with an A going into the next exam or I'm sitting with an F. So I would just pretend like, okay, this is my first go around. I'm going to do what I can. So I kind of kept myself motivated that way by the unknown, because like you said, if you go into an exam where you're feeling overconfident or overly positive, you might be like, I already know this, and you skip, you just rush through it, and then you find out, oh man, I missed questions that I already knew, but I was just rushing through because I was cocky. And then on the flip side is you might know the information, you might be well prepared, but if you walk in there with an attitude like, I don't know if I'm going to pass, you might have just talked yourself into failing. So I like the idea of remaining neutral. I think that's a good approach. Don't get too high, don't get too low. Go in there knowing that you are prepared for the exam, and let your performance kind of speak for itself. So I like that, Jeanie. So another question for you is, a lot of times people either look at such granular things that they're really, I don't want to call them narrow-minded, but they're just focused on what's like right directly in front of them, instead of maybe looking at the overall picture. So, what I'm trying to get at is, so when you're getting ready to prepare for the ARE, should you look at the overall picture, meaning like, okay, after I get done taking all these exams, I'm a registered architect, maybe I'll get promoted, maybe I'll get a raise, I can maybe find a different job or go into practice for myself? Or do I want to just focus on, okay, if I pass the project management division, it's going to get me this, or if I practice, do the construction evaluation. So should we be looking at it more as an exam by exam approach, or should I look at the overall picture?
Definitely the overall picture. And then, as we know, construction all tied to the economy. We just don't know when the next wave, whatever that happens, gonna hit you. We have a pandemic, all shut down, and for a while, and all the project was starting. It was just like everybody's like, just stop, let's pause. So yeah, definitely having a big picture view, and not maybe. However, if you're in a company, there is a room for you to very narrowly channel your position, your status, your position there, then definitely you can, of course, use that as a leverage. If some office kind of like, there's like an office I worked in California back then, is that if you're not a licensed architect, you will not make an associate. Because like an architecture firm, you call so-and-so architects, you have to have architects. If a plural, there's more than one. But you have to say it's just the principal's name, then he's the primary architect.
Now that makes sense. I mean, I think that approach can go both ways, and I like that. So, motivation isn't just about getting started, right? Sure, let's say you're on Thanksgiving, they always have a turkey trot out here where it's like a 5-mile run, right? And everyone, is at the starting line. They're hooting and hollering. They're all excited. They're motivated to start the race. And then about 100 yards into the race, you realize, oh man, I still got 4.9 miles to go. So your motivation might not be what it was at the beginning. So we know that the ARE is not a short journey. It's not one exam, it's made up of 6 exams. So, motivation over all of them could be difficult to maintain. So especially if you were presented with, oh man, I failed the first exam. How do I find the motivation to either retake that exam and to keep trucking along?
Yeah, I think again, see it as an experience, especially then your first one, give yourself even more excuse to be like, first time, I have no idea. I didn't even know I need to sit in there 4 hours in the exam room. Actually, that makes me very uncomfortable. Like then the next time you're like, okay, maybe I can prepare differently to help me even physically more comfortable. Like, oh, bring a jacket I can roll up to support my back, or something that's gonna make yourself feel like you're a little bit more in control of the situation. And yeah, it's not a judgment about you as a practicing as an we already practice in an office. what you can do on a daily basis. And some of your everyday experience does kind of cloud your judgment when you're on exam. Because as we all know, doing practice and what's exam legality, in real life, there's some gray area. But on the exam, you're trying to switch back into that mindset is like legally, what is supposed to happen? What is this AIA contract supposed to dictate? And sometimes when I found myself stuck or like a problem, there's like multiple choice and narrow down to two, I can't really quite sure which one to choose. I always went in a mindset or the very basic, what the exam trying to test you, your understanding of how to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. So you kind of like, okay, which one of these choices is going to best protect the welfare of the public. So use kind of that and meditate on that a little bit. Help you.
No, that's some helpful advice. So, I mean, you're right. Just because you fail a division exam, it's not a reflection on what type of an architect you are or how good of an architect you are. It could be that you didn't have your best performance that day, or maybe you're not a good exam taker. So, I think being able to separate that, and because what'll happen is if you start to doubt yourself as an architect, it leads to some bigger issues, but it could just be you had a bad day. Yeah. So, I tell people, get on the horse, get back up, get on the horse and ride it again. Again, easier said than done, but I think you're right. It's not a reflection on the type of architect you are. It's just, there's other factors that may have, played a role on that particular exam result. So, preparing for an exam is a big commitment, especially if you're juggling work and maybe you have family as well. Yeah. So, any advice on how you can kind of, even though you're working full time and, maybe your family with some small children, how do you manage your study time? What kind of advice can you give to people that need to juggle many balls at one time?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I see a lot of my peers who have family and have kids, and really taking exams has to put on the back burner or like way back. And then some of them are pretty satisfied working, because actually working in an office, you will not be the one who's stamping the drawing, because insurance and the companies, all that, so will be whoever one of the principal in whatever insurance they have will stamp all the drawings. But in practice, every day, it is good to actually have that knowledge of what contracts and legality has to do, so that makes you a better architect. That's a really tough question, because if you have already a lot of life obligation, you just have to carve out time. That's just it. And again, trying to rely on your friends. If you have someone in a similar situation and become study buddies, that will, unfortunately, I can't speak too much. I'm luckily I don't have kids and too much obligation.
No, I agree. It's a tough question to answer. Everyone's situation is different. All we can tell people is make sure you set aside the amount of time that you need. And, for each person, that amount of time can be different, right? Some people might need 4 months. Some people might need 6 months. Some people can say, hey, I can go take it in 2 weeks. So it's just making sure you manage your time and commitments to where they make each of them achievable. So, celebrating success and wins are very important, and even when it comes to taking and passing an exam. So, when it comes to sports, you hear about, let's take baseball, for example. Let's say Dodgers are trying to get to the World Series. So they win their division. They might celebrate a little bit because they know the journey's not completed. They get through the championship series, they celebrate a little bit bigger maybe, but they still are maintaining a little bit of, I guess, downtime or quiet time, because they know they have one more series to win. So how important is it when you come to pass your first ARE division exam? Should you celebrate that, or should you just be like, well, let me just kind of check mark this box because I still got 5 to go?
Well, do give yourself a break. But toward the end, after you all finish all 6, I do feel, not just me, I talk to all my friends, it feels very anticlimactic, like, well, you don't feel like, I didn't change. I didn't make me feel like any different. But some of that will settle in later. It does feel like, a long journey. For me, it was beginning to end was about a little over 2 years. afterward, and it felt like, okay, now I have all the time, I'm gonna all these hobby, I'm gonna resume and all that. So that could be your carrot at the end, that you will able to do all the other things that you put aside for a few years. Well, the shorter you make it, the sooner you'll get to the finish line. Yeah. So, but in between, do give yourselves a break. Maybe just don't even open any of the material for a week. Kind of flush out your system. Also, during that time, you'll be surprised what you got tested and studied is starting to settle into your long-term memory. And then you give yourself, a couple of weeks of break, and then get back on the studying for the next exam. So I think that's how I did it too. I did give myself, yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense. So, I don't know if I can go back this far, but you remember when you're back in college and you're studying for an exam, you might approach that a little bit differently than you do maybe this ARE exam. And let me kind of explain. So a lot of times in college, people cram for an exam, right? Night before, 2 days before. So when you're preparing for an exam, cramming is probably not the best way to approach it, but should you also take breaks during your exam preparation? So let's say I want to study for the construction and evaluation division, and I'm going to study, let's just say, for 6 weeks. Should I hammer through those 6 weeks, or should I build in some break time?
I think that also varies. Well, if you do give yourself a break, sometimes it's easy that you thought you would just take a weekend, but then it turned into a full weekend the next weekend. So it does have to be mindful how you can discipline yourself. So this is a little kind of know yourself, kind of like, okay, if I am not going to skip studying this week, can I catch up or make it up next week? Otherwise, it's so easy. The next thing you know, then you give yourself 6 to 8 weeks to study. You're like 12 weeks out. So just drags out the pain, and then you forgot what you studied because you had So yeah, I think the difference between studying in college, the professor gives you the test date. That's set.
Correct.
So
Correct.
you sprint to that goal. Here, you actually have to set your own test date. And you also have the opportunity, if you pay a little bit of money, to move that further. So It's not an incentive. It's a definitely self-discipline.
I agree. And I think you brought up a very valuable point. College, you're right. They're setting the exam date for you, right? Professor says, hey, December 9th is exam number 2. You either take it or you don't. And then if you don't take it, you're penalized. But with these exams, you can push the date. Or even if you don't let's say you haven't even gotten that far, there's no one telling you, hey, you need to set it for this day. And so like you mentioned, even if you do say, hey, I'm going to take it on December 31st, you pay a small nominal fee and you can push it till February the 14th. So I see what your point is. And also, one thing too is, as you mentioned, is, when you're on a roll, sometimes it's easier and better to maintain that pace because if you decide to take a break, let's say, I'm taking a break, I'm going to go watch the World Series. I take a weekend off. I might never start back up for another week because, tomorrow never comes when it comes to that, right? Oh, I'll do this tomorrow. I'll do this tomorrow. So if you're on a roll, continue on with it because sometimes you hit the brakes and it's hard to get, it's like pushing a car, right? Runs out of gas. You're pushing a car. Once you get it moving, it's moving. But if you stop it and then you try to push it again, it's a harder effort. So once you get those wheels going, I agree. As we spoke, I guess as we've discussed on the last couple of episodes, it's a marathon, right? The ARE isn't one exam and you're done. So let me say I came to you, Jeanie, and said, hey, I just finished my 4th division exam. I got 2 to go, but I'm running out of gas. I'm feeling the load of, going through and preparing for 4 exams, sitting through the 4 exams. What kind of words of encouragement could you give saying, hey, to let this person know, hey, Chris, you're 2 exams away?
Yeah, that's very close. Again, I think I'll go back our first beginning of this session is like, why do we even do this, right? So I think we skip a couple things I forgot to mention that, actually you're not legally to call yourself an architect unless you're licensed. And actually depends on the state. Some of them, I think in Texas, if you're building that's under 25,000 square feet, you actually don't need a licensed architect to be your designer to plan your building. You can call yourself a building building designer. And then I think there's another, but under that title, while you're regulated by jurisdiction at being an architect, but you're also protected by some of their regulation as well. I think if you've done a project under the title of a building designer, it follows your entire life. 30 years later, the balcony fell down, you'll be sued. You're liable for something like that.
Oh, wow.
Whereas I think as when you're a registered architect, there's a 10-year expiration date. Like after the 10-year, something happened to that building. Of course, you'll still get the call. We want to find out what happened, but you're not less liable for failure in the future. So I think that's one thing. I remember I learned this when I was in grad school. Yeah, they were like, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. So, I know we've spoken for maybe the last half hour or so about, being motivated, taking what path to take. And I think you've shared a lot of great information with the audience. So I appreciate that. So I always like to end the episode with you to kind of have a little bit of fun. You're out there in New York, in the Bronx, right?
Brooklyn.
Oh, no, Brooklyn. Sorry, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Brooklyn, New York. So I always, a lot of great architecture out in the Big Apple. So holiday season is coming. So, there's a lot of stores that decorate their storefronts. There's a lot of, places that put up a lot of Christmas lights. So if I were to say, Jeanie, I'm coming to the Big Apple, I'm coming to either Brooklyn or I'm going to Manhattan, and I want to see the most festive storefronts and the most lit up buildings, where am I going to be told to go, Jeanie?
Oh, wow. Well, unfortunately, a lot of stuff, there's some empty storefront this year. Yeah, down Fifth Avenue and all that. But yeah, you can, of course, always go to the Rockefeller Center. There's the big tree and all that. So pretty touristy, Times Square. Now we're actually interesting to see there's a lot of new architecture, happening, right? The Hudson Yard. I am interested to see what, other stuff they're going to have over there with the vessel. Do you see that the stair that goes up and up and by Thomas Heatherwick? And we also, the new open this summer is the little island. So they look like little cones, and then there's a man-made island, a little small island, a park, and that people can go. So we're all kind of interested in being all little snow cones this year.
Jeanie, I always appreciate the fun that you had at the end. The nuances of New York, you like to share them, and I appreciate that. So again, thanks for coming out today and talking to people about some how to be motivated, stay motivated, how to get started, how to maintain that role once you're on it. Definitely would like to have you back. Maybe we can talk about some architectural things in New York and maybe compare somehow architecture is different on one coast to the other. But definitely would love to have you back, Jeanie.
Sure.
To the rest of you, we'll see you next week. And Jeanie, thank you so much for joining today, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.